Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lights Out, your virtual campfire. I'm your hostess with the mostest ghosties, Sylvia Schultz. On December 1st, 1958, one of the most tragic events in Chicago history claimed nearly 100 lives and changed school safety policy permanently. The tragedy of the fire at Our Lady of the Angels Grade School is commemorated in Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois, where many victims are buried. Join me for a look at Chicago history as we go Lights Out. Queen of Heaven Cemetery in the Chicago suburb of Hillside is a beautiful, restful spot, green in the Illinois summer, and dotted with color from the flowers it left at the graves of loved ones. It's a place to reflect on lives lived and lost, a place where the living can go to find peace and comfort, a place where the dead can be remembered with dignity. One of the countless memorials here is a blocky stone monument covered with names. The Virgin Mary stands in high relief on one side of the block, her head bowed and her hands outstretched in welcome. This is not a fancy Renaissance-style sculpture. Mary is dressed in a simple robe, and a small halo shines behind her veiled head. The message on the monument is simple, too. Our Lady of the Angels, pray for us. This is the memorial to the 92 students and 3 nuns who perished in the fire at Our Lady of the Angels Grade School on December 1st, 1958. This tragedy led to a complete overhaul of school safety regulations. It is still considered one of the most awful and horrifying events in Chicago's history. The Blessed Virgin Mary Order of Nuns was founded in 1833 by Sister Mary Frances Clark. In 1867, the order, devoted to education, began serving in the Chicago Archdiocese. The nuns of the order were very concerned about fire safety, and with good reason. In 1870, their mother house in Dubuque, Iowa, had burned to the ground. Since then, for 88 years, every member of the order included in their daily prayers a request that they and their students be spared from fire. Our Lady of the Angels Grade School at 3820 West Iowa Street in Chicago's Humboldt Park neighborhood was one of the schools served by these nuns. Many Catholic families attended the school, with siblings filling several grades. 1958 was right in the middle of the baby boom, too. With around 1,400 students enrolled at the school, classrooms were very overcrowded. December 1st, 1958 was a cold and cloudless day in the Chicago suburbs. It was a Monday, and the students were back at their desks after the weekend. The children had eaten lunch, and afternoon classes had begun. The fire began after 2:20 p.m. in a 30-gallon trash can at the bottom of a stairwell. The cardboard trash can, with metal rings at the top and bottom to hold it together, was full of paper. After burning through all the paper, the fire smoldered for a while in the confined space under the stairwell. 3 walls covered in sheet metal reflected and intensified the heat. The heat continued to build, and finally, a window shattered. Oxygen was sucked into the area, causing the smoldering fire in the garbage can to flare up. The flames spread to the wooden staircase, varnished woodwork, and walls covered with 14 layers of paint. The top 2 layers were particularly flammable. Custodians had used a rubberized plastic paint. As it burned, it produced a heavy, toxic black smoke. The stairwell turned into a giant chimney. The fire was stopped from entering the first-floor corridor by the fire doors, but it swept up the stairway and devoured the 85-foot-long hallway that led to the second-floor classrooms, burning at over 1,400 degrees. One reason the fire was such a deadly inferno was because of the roof. Over the years, the roof had been sealed several times with hot tar, the new layer being poured over the old. If the old tar had been stripped off before applying a new roof, the fire could have burned through the roof and vented itself. As it was, the multiple layers of tar acted as an impermeable seal, great for keeping rain off and fire in. Under that seal the fire was trapped, insatiable, a dragon roaring out of control. Hot air and gases continued to flow up from the basement. They were inside the wall now, feeding through an open shaft that had once held a drinking fountain, now disconnected. The flames filled the small attic above the second-floor ceiling, moving towards the 6 classrooms in the north wing, packed with 329 students and 6 teachers. These secondary flames found their way through 2 ventilation grills in the ceiling and dropped down into the second-floor hallway, joining the primary fire. The first sign of trouble in room 209 came when a student was going about his daily chore of collecting waste paper from his classmates. When he bent to pick up the metal garbage basket near the back of the room, for some reason the basket felt hot. Just then, another student told Sister Davidus, the teacher, that he smelled something burning. When teacher and student tried to open the door to the hallway, smoke poured into the classroom. The inferno raged through the second-floor hallway. The glass transom windows over the classroom doors shattered from the intense heat. Smoke and flames poured into the classrooms over the transoms, caught the flammable ceiling tiles on fire, and forced the students towards the windows. Here, younger students ran into their own difficulties trying to escape the flames. The window ledges were 37.5 inches off the floor, too high for little kids to scramble over. Some students, trusting their teacher when she told them to pray for help, sat quietly at their desks as they had been told, folded their hands, and prayed, watching as the paint on the walls changed color from white to tan to brown. Firemen fought their way into one classroom to find 24 children sitting dead at their desks. Their books were still open in front of them. The fire alarm rang only inside the school. It didn't transmit a signal to the fire department. When the fire trucks did arrive, they went first to the wrong address because a housekeeper had phoned in the alarm from the rectory next door to the school. The scene that met the firefighters was among the worst ever encountered by first responders in the history of American fire service. The smoke conditions were horrifying, even for trained professionals. Thick, black, toxic smoke poured from the building, making entry difficult. And breathing apparatus equipment for firefighters didn't exist in 1958. It might not have helped the firefighters battle their way through the smoke-filled classrooms anyway. According to one fire chief who fought the blaze, it wouldn't have made any difference. That smoke was so bad, all you would have had was a bunch of dead firemen. The firefighters tried their best, though. They rescued 160 students from the flames. The injured students and teachers were taken to St. Anne's and to other hospitals on the city's west side. St. Anne's, being the closest to the school, ended up with the most casualties, almost twice as many as the other hospitals combined. Luckily, the fire happened during the 3 o'clock shift change, meaning that twice the number of hospital staff was present when the injured started pouring in. At St. Anne's, 37 children and 3 nuns were admitted. Of those, 10 children and 1 nun were dead on arrival. 2 more students died before they could be admitted. The number of victims was horrifying. 90 students and 3 nuns were injured, not only from burns and smoke inhalation, but also from jumping to escape the fire. The deaths were even more appalling. The fire claimed the lives of 92 children and 3 nuns. The school was woefully unprepared for a fire. There were no smoke detectors and no sprinkler system. There were fire doors, but only on the first floor, and there was only one fire escape for the entire building. Unbelievably, the school had passed a safety inspection only 2 months before the fire. The response to the fire was immediate. At Cook County Jail, inmates lined up to donate blood. At Stateville Prison in Joliet, inmates gave up their cigarettes and candy rations, donating that money to the fire fund. The tragedy was reported all over the world. The BBC called the fire too awful for words. The response of the Catholic Church, meanwhile, was somewhat muted. Although the Archdiocese was just as devastated by the tragedy as neighborhood families were, they were ill-equipped to provide any real relief. Catholic Charities sent priests and nuns out into the neighborhood, but their role was to console the survivors, not to provide counseling for them. Consolation was needed as well as counseling. One of the most heart-wrenching tales to arise from the tragedy was the experience of Stanley Berta. On the day of the fire, Berta was occupying a bed in Cook County Hospital on Polk Street. This was a place where folks down on their luck could come for inexpensive health care, and Berta had had more than his share of bad luck recently. A week or so before, Berta had been laid off from his job at Bowman Dairy. This worried him, as he had a wife and 4 kids to support. Then, on the day after Thanksgiving, he'd been chopping wood in the basement, and a piece of metal, either from the axe or a stray nail, flew up and struck his left eye. Berta was taken to Cook County, where he had an operation to remove the shard of metal from his eye. As he lay in the hospital after the surgery, Berta must have been asking himself, what else could possibly go wrong? That's when a priest came in and told Berta that his oldest child, 13-year-old Beverly Ann, had been killed in the fire at Our Lady of the Angels. She'd been taken to the Cook County morgue and was now lying on a cold metal table right across the street from the hospital where her father had had his eye operation. Berta climbed out of his hospital bed and went in search of his doctor. He had to go home, had to be with his wife. His doctor released him, but he warned Berta not to cry. If you cry, the salt from your tears might scald your eye, the doctor said. If that happens, it could blind you. Berta's response? God's will be done. Some of the parishioners of Our Lady of the Angels found it difficult to accept God's will in the weeks and months after the tragedy. For the children who escaped the fire, survivors' guilt was compounded by the religious teachings of the Catholic Church. The nuns explained to the children that only the good ones were taken. Using kid logic to puzzle this out, many survivors came to the conclusion that if the good ones had died, and if they themselves had survived, then they must be bad. The fire at Our Lady of the Angels School gave rise to many amazing stories. Some parishioners had mysterious premonitions. One mother had an unsettling vision of her small son in a casket on the evening before the fire. Linda Malinsky, 10 years old and in the 5th grade, woke up crying from a nightmare Sunday night. When her mother came running to see what was wrong, Linda cried, "Mommy, I can't breathe!" Linda had asthma, and it had woven its way into her dream. She had a nightmare that her family's apartment was on fire and filling with smoke, and she woke up coughing. Her mother calmed her down, reassuring the young girl that everything was fine. As Linda calmed down, she sleepily mumbled, "Mommy, I hear people screaming." Linda and her brother both stayed home from school sick Monday morning, but felt better after lunch. Mary Malinsky took her children's temperatures and decided they were both well enough to go to school for afternoon classes. Linda died in the fire. Her brother survived. There were several reports of crisis apparitions at the time of the fire. One woman said that her parents had come to school to look for her and her brother. They found the girl, and the mother looked up to see the boy running towards his parents with a big smile on his face. In the milling confusion, though, the parents lost track of the boy. Hours later, they learned to their horror that he hadn't left the school at all. He had died in his second-floor classroom. To her dying day, the woman's mother was convinced she'd seen her son outside the school that day. Another story tells of a boy who searched frantically for his sister in the chaos outside the school. He spotted her a block away, walking in the direction of their home. He sagged with the relief of knowing his sister was safe. But when he got home, he found out that his sister had indeed perished. Many of the little ghosts came back with words of comfort for their grieving families. "Don't worry," one girl's spirit told her devastated brother. "I'm going to watch over you." Another ghost sat with his mother and held her hand after she had been to the morgue to identify his body. People still claim to smell smoke at the memorial in Queen of Heaven Cemetery, where 25 of the children who died are buried. And a student at the school built to replace Our Lady of the Angels told of hearing screams in the hallway at the new school. She filled page after page of drawing paper with sketches of the faces she saw in her dreams, faces of the fire's victims. I visited Queen of Heaven Cemetery on yet another gorgeous sunny fall day, just chilly enough for a jeans jacket. The trees were still clothed in green, although here and there a maple tree had started its change to fiery red. As I was driving through the cemetery looking for the Holy Innocents' shrine, I stopped at a crossroads to let an Amazon truck turn in front of me. I thought, well, heck, Amazon is really expanding their reach if they're delivering Prime packages to the dead. I found the shrine with no trouble. As described, there is a statue of the Virgin with a marker next to her with the names of those killed in the fire. I parked the car and got out. As I approached the graves, I noticed that there were a couple of workmen bustling around the grounds. I remembered seeing a sign at the entrance to the cemetery saying that grave decorations had to be removed by that weekend. I paused near a metal and glass owl yard decoration. I thought to myself what a shame it was that all of the decorations would be dumped into a pile at the cemetery's garbage pit by the end of the day. As I admired the pretty little owl, a rough voice said, in an accent tinged with Latino, "You like it?" "Yes, I do," I said honestly. "Go ahead and take it," the groundskeeper said. He nodded at a ceramic Eeyore figurine. "You can take anything you like. We're just cleaning it up anyway." "Well, thanks," I said, and picked up a couple of yard decorations. They now grace my garden, and I remember that beautiful cemetery every time I see them. "No problem," the worker answered. Then he said with a quick grin, "Thanks for shopping at Phil's." We shared a laugh. Then he moved to the plots nearby while I lingered at the Holy Innocents' shrine. I noticed several other little offerings at the feet of the Virgin. I did not help myself to those. There was some sort of metal in a Ziploc bag that I couldn't identify. A scapular lay next to the baggie, its strings only a little in disarray because of errant breezes in the cemetery. A scapular, also called a devotional scapular, is a religious item made of 2 small pieces of cloth, just a couple inches square, that sometimes are decorated with religious images or text. These are connected by 2 strings. It's worn by putting the strings on the shoulders, with one square lying on the chest and the other trailing down the back. The word scapular comes from the scapula bones of the shoulder blades. In the Roman Catholic Church, wearing a scapular is seen as a way to be constantly in a state of devotion, usually to Mary. It's said that the protection is so powerful that many Catholics wear a scapular constantly, except when bathing. One variant of scapular even has the words stitched on it, "Whosoever dies wearing the scapular will not suffer eternal fire." Pretty powerful stuff. I took the opportunity to chat with whoever might have been hanging around at the shrine. I'm at Queen of Heaven Cemetery, and I am standing at the Shrine of the Holy Innocents, which were victims of the Our Lady of the Angels fire, December 1st, 1958. The base of the monument says, "Our Lady of the Angels, pray for us. In devout memory of the victims of the fire, December 1st, 1958, at Our Lady of the Angels School, erected by the parishioners, the priests, the sisters, and their pastor, the Right Reverend Monsignor Joseph F. Cusson." There are all sorts of decorations here that children would like. There are a couple of pinwheels. There's a stuffed Eeyore. And these decorations have obviously been put here after 1958. These little children are still remembered. Raggedy Ann and Andy doll. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a stuffed Eeyore, it's a statue of an Eeyore. And there's a rock next to him saying, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them." Which I agree with completely. Oh, that's a neat little system. Okay, there are two stones with the names of all the victims on there, and across from every name there is one or two or three or four little crosses etched. And at the very end of the monument it says the cross following each name identifies the cemetery location. So these victims are buried in one of 6 cemeteries: St. Adalbert, St. Joseph, Mount Carmel, Queen of Heaven, St. Nicholas, and Norway, Michigan. So that tells you where each of these people are buried. So they're not all buried here, just the monument is here to recognize all of the names all in the same place. So that is a nifty system. That's cool. I wonder, there is a Ziploc baggie here that looks sort of like trash, but it's not. It is being held in place on the ground by a little American flag, and inside the baggie it looks like there's a dime. Maybe it's from 1958, who knows. A couple of coins. Looks like a couple of saints' medals on ribbons. And there's also a scapula here. I'm going to move the recorder here so it's sitting next to Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. And I'll ask some questions. Is there anyone around here who would like to speak with me? Can you tell me who brought Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy? Who did you bring the dolls for? Can you tell me what's in this plastic bag held down by the flag? If anyone's here, if you'd like to say something to me, please do. I'm here to listen. I have to sneeze. I just had an interesting thought. It's kind of sad. I mean, here are these 10 to 13-year-old kids, most of them. And they're just buried here with their classmates and not with their families. And then I thought to myself, well, quite a few of these families were probably recent immigrants to the Chicago area, young families with young kids, and these parents probably hadn't even given any thought to where they themselves were going to be buried, much less their children. So when it came time to bury children, and the diocese decided to make this burial ground for the children, I guess the parents just said, well, yeah, let's bury them all together if we can and have classmates together. They're not all here, of course, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, maybe they didn't have family plots. And then once this is established, you can't put other family members here, so I guess I'd be rubbish as a cemetery planner. Thanks for coming along with me for a visit to this pretty place, one that holds such significance in Chicago history. In the next episode, we'll be visiting another part of Queen of Heaven Cemetery, the Massive Mausoleum. Join me next time as we go lights out.